One of the strong economies in the world, UK, has been home for varied cultures over the years. But today, it faces the issue of Islamophobia. Hate crime overall has risen by 17% over the years, and of more than 94,000 cases recorded, 75% were race related. In recent times, the issue has become even more severe as politicians like Prime Minister Boris Johnson have not been held accountable for their comments about Muslim women being bank robbers. Online Islamophobia totaled 34% of the cases reported. Amanda Morris, a Catholic born who converted to Islam 22 years ago, has been actively involved with Muslim Council of Britain.
When I became Muslim, it was 1997. So this is pre 9/11. And at that time, there was prejudice, but it was more of a racial prejudice. So, I would get called like the P word, I would get called the N word and things like that, which was slightly ironic considering that I'm, very, very white. But it was, there was a racialized sort of hatred towards Muslims at that time, but it was still very, very minor. After 9/11, then after 7/7, there was suddenly a sharp increase. Fortunately, for me personally, I haven't experienced much of it, but I have heard too many stories from my friends and family members who have had really awful experiences. And again, there's the Islamophobic side of it, where people are showing hatred for the religion and the religious symbols. Like, for example, the hijab, or if a man has a beard or something like that, they will show animosity towards those religious symbols. But then there's a racialized element as well. So, we will hear things like, F off back home, you Muslim P word. So it's like they're marrying the two together. They're not making a distinction between what's the religion and what's the ethnicity.
Sahar Al-Faifi is the regional manager of Muslim engagement and development in Cardiff. She herself is a victim of Islamophobia on a number of occasions.
Personally, countless, absolutely countless. It has become part of my life. I report these incidents at least, once every 2 weeks to the police. I think one of the most recent one, it was in Birmingham New Street Station, when someone actually in suit, a white man in suit, looked at me and said I am a letterbox. Now, I used to be called a terrorist and a bomber and all of these names, but for the first time, and now I'm being called a letterbox because it was the previous Foreign Minister Boris Johnson from the Conservative Party who actually described Muslim women, veiled Muslim women, as letterboxes and bank robbers.
The Muslim community has been trying to tackle the issue of Islamophobia by the means of education, open mosque sessions, and connecting with the non-Muslim communities on ground level. Organizations like Muslim Engagement and Development, CAGE, Muslim Council of Britain, Muslim Council of Wales have been formed to fight for the rights of Muslims. Azad Ali is involved with CAGE, which is an advocacy and campaigning organization that challenges the discriminatory laws and legislation.
So what we want to do is not look at the narrative through a prism of Muslims and Islam. It's got nothing to do with Muslims and Islam. It's actually a societal issue on how violence and why violence is carried out, and what are the reasons and what are the consequences. So we want to reshape the whole discussion and narrative away from Muslims and Islam to actually the issue itself, which is violence.
One of the reasons why Islamophobia is increasing rapidly is because of lack of knowledge amongst the non-Muslim community regarding Islam. The issue is people are marrying the ethnicity and religion. Politicians like Nigel Farage feel that people who adhere Islam in UK don't accept UK culture, don't accept UK law. They want to impose their version of the world upon the host country, and that would lead us towards disaster. But then, the UK law of freedom of thought, religion and belief under the Human Rights Act allow an individual to practice their own religion. Then why are the followers of Islam treated differently? Non-Muslim community is unaware about the reasons behind every practice and tend to believe on the pre-assumptions. So the question arises, is telling people about Islam a good way to tackle Islamophobia? Tanveer Ahmed has been associated with Muslim Council of Wales and has been tackling Islamophobia with his own ways.
My wife is a white revert Muslim, but she wears hijab. Thankfully, she wears hijab, and she was somebody shouted her on the street, "Go back to where you come from." She's from Cardiff. She's a white woman from Cardiff, and just again because of the ignorance, because of the fear, they're saying to her, "Go back to where you come from." How do you educate somebody on such a basic thing? That I'm white, my name is whatever, I'm born and bred here, I am already home.
A lot of organizations will be involved in education. So for example, propagating what Islam actually is. And by that, I don't mean proselytizing. What I mean is just educating people, because there's so much misinformation out there. So that's one thing that a lot of our affiliates will be involved in, especially the mosques and the schools.
What I try to do is I'm involved in a couple of projects that are based maybe in a couple of different mosques and something independent from mosques, where we can present Islam in the basic form and have question and answer sessions and educational sessions to fill in the gaps of knowledge, that when there are gaps of knowledge, then people can implant false information. So I'm trying to reduce them gaps with the real knowledge about Islam, and then hopefully this is my way of trying to push back against the Islamophobia. My aim is just to educate, but knowledge is power, as they say, and ignorance is what causes the fear, and the fear leads to hatred and bigotry and Islamophobia and other types of hatred. So if I can reduce the ignorance just by my education, then naturally one of the byproducts will be to, God willing, reduce the levels of Islamophobia, but that's not my primary aim. That's just a byproduct.
Terrorism has no religion. You cannot say this is Muslim terrorist and that is a Christian terrorist. Once he is terrorist, he has no religion other than a shaitan religion.
In the last few years, several anti-racism marches have been organized to make people aware about different race and how every community should be treated equally. The sufferers of Islamophobia and the community people have actively taken part in the marches to tackle Islamophobia from their end. But despite everything, several cases have still been reported, and public comments from esteemed group have made the situation even worse. Media plays a huge role in shaping a news, but then the right-wing media outlets hardly report about Islamophobia and also generalize the Muslim community all around the globe, which is another reason behind rise of Islamophobia in UK.
Interesting is that Muslims are 5% of the UK population, yeah? And yet we make up a disproportionate number of the news stories, right? So it's almost like I'm thinking, do we really need to be this much in the spotlight? It's kind of unfortunate that we are this much in the spotlight. So when we ask, are people doing enough? Sometimes I think we're doing more than enough in that sense. But what's the issue is, are people listening?
What we've seen in the last 15 to 20 years in the British media and the wider media across the world is how Muslims are being demonized using labels. These labels serve nothing other than to otherize Muslims from A, the society they live in, B, amongst themselves in the community, causing divisions. So labels like that are not helpful and they are meaningless. What they act towards is the helping of draconian and oppressive laws and legislations.
For a project within MCB that's called the Centre for Media Monitoring. And what we work on is engaging with the local communities to educate them as to what is Islamophobia, what's causing it, what sort of narratives are being pushed in the media, and how we can deal with it, and how we can proactively engage with it, and engage with the media in order to tell our stories ourselves. But then we also have another area of our work that we do, which is engaging with journalists directly. Because most journalists are just doing their job, and it's not like they're going out and saying, okay, I'm going to demonize Muslims today. They don't do that. Why would they do that? But they're going out and they're telling a story, but they also have these subconscious biases that they have been fed for decades now. You know, it's what, nearly 20 years since 9/11, 18 years since 9/11. So it's been a long time that this, and even prior to that, you know, Islam didn't have a great image, to be honest, in the public conscience. So they've been fed this their whole lives, we're helping them to get over that unconscious bias in order to understand who Muslims really are, what our concerns really are, how we're really absolutely no different from anybody else in this country. We just maybe pray differently, that's it. Eat slightly different food, that's it. You know, but our concerns are the same, our needs are the same, our dreams are the same. You know, and so we're just working with the journalists to help them identify the areas that they need to work on, and we also hear their ideas.
The Prime Minister of UK, Boris Johnson, and the founder of Britain's UK Independence Party, Nigel Farage, who is a far-right politician, have used Islam as a means to gather votes, and instead of solving the issue, they have used it for their personal benefits.
We are seeing from all levels of society. It's not just the people on the street, because it doesn't start with them. It starts at the top, government level. We are seeing now that we are asking for investigations into an official investigation into Islamophobia in the Conservative Party. Now they backtracked and downgraded it. We will just have a look. So from the government level, down to the council level, down to the media level, and then from that level it filters down to the people.
Islamophobia is far more sophisticated than the abuse in the street. It can be institutional, it can be structural, and what I mean by that is any kind of attempt to exclude Muslims or active citizens from public life and participating in politics and media, or not include them in discussions, and not including Muslim in policy making process, especially in policies that is relevant to them. This kind of exclusion, it is part of an institution, Islamophobia, and it's sad to see even some government officials are actually fall into this type of Islamophobia.
If you look at the President of the United States has told a congresswoman in his country, in his Senate, in his legal political system to go back home. This is normalized. Why and how have we got there? The way we've got there isn't overnight. It happened with a minority. So what happened was, first they kind of otherized the Muslim to the extent where it became so normal, it was easy to otherize everyone.
I am part of an organization called Muslim Engagement and Development, for short MEND. And this organization aims to tackle Islamophobia by raising awareness about it and also engaging the Muslim community in two main fields, media and politics, because Islamophobia is getting worse in Britain, especially after Brexit. We do have, sadly, also resistance from government officials to acknowledge that Islamophobia as a problem, and there's a resistance, for example, to adopt a definition of Islamophobia, and that just worsen the problem. And what you see quite often is that Muslim women, visibly Muslim women, are actually at the sharp end of this kind of xenophobia, which is Islamophobia in our case. And a lot of these women have been verbally abused and sometimes physically abused.
The security service, the MI5, actually published a report that said the more conservative you are, the less likely you're going to get involved in terrorism. So this is actually a nonsensical point of view. One is not related to the other. What the relationship and what needs to be looked at is violence. Why is violence taking place? And what are the consequences of those acts of violence?
World of increasing atheism, it's shocking to see discrimination on the basis of religion. While the world moves towards technological development, we still find ourselves stuck in the puddle of racism. Islamophobia is not just an issue in UK, but has spread all around the globe, and now it has no boundaries. Sooner or later, the fight may end, but the question is, what are we really fighting against? The government? The people? Or the ideology of the society? The list goes on and on. But we should ask ourselves a simple question. What kind of a future we wish to see? A future full of hatred, or a future where humanity lives in peace?